All right, it's time for Yogi and the Beach Man. Hi, I'm Jim the Yogi.
And I'm Rick Beach the Beach Man.
We're two Michigan transplants now living in Southwest Florida.
In fact, we're cousins born in 1964, just a month apart.
I like to meditate.
And I like to play bass in a band.
I'm into chanting Om.
And I'm into throwing down some classic rock.
But together, we're on a mission
to promote people that are helping other people.
We want to make the world a better place.
One conversation at a time.
So sit back,
turn up the volume,
and get ready to laugh.
Because we like to have fun
while we spread the love.
Interviewing lovely people. Yes, we have fun.
I know what everyone else is talking about right now.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that.
Well, my daughter came up. I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that.
If you want.
For another reason, that would be great, I think.
Okay, it could be.
I mean, I think, I'm an independent. Full disclosure, I'm an independent. So that's what I am.
Rick used to be.
I voted libertarian pretty much my whole life.
So for me, I think it's really important to discuss like the emotional toll of the political process and of the division and stuff. And like, it doesn't have to be about the candidates, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Because pretending like people aren't suffering is wrong. And my entire week this week has been about trying to prepare people. I mean, I recorded today's episode on the weekend before I knew who would win, but literally it's about disappointment and managing disappointment, right? Because at least half the people are probably going to be disappointed. So,
right.
One
way or the other. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, slightly less than half.
I know. That's interesting too.
It looked like half in the polls, but that's how it turned out.
So fascinating.
Yes, for sure.
So difference between what people do in private versus when they're looking someone in the eyes. That's interesting too.
Well, every single poll that I got by text for the last couple weeks, I did not answer truthfully.
Interesting.
I intentionally skewed. And because I just wanted it. It was kind of my strategy. I don't want to participate in any of their propaganda machine or their this or their that. So I try to be as deceitful to them as they are to us.
That's interesting.
Because you don't know who's sending you these polls and asking you these questions.
That's true.
What they're going to use your data for.
Right.
So
you
unless
don't.
they identify who they are to me and I know who I'm talking to, I'm not going to trust them.
Yeah. I don't even answer those text messages. We're in Michigan. So we definitely got a lot. I didn't answer anything.
I didn't do any of those. I never answered any of them.
Well, I enjoy trolling. And I really, truly do. And, but
enjoy a good trolling.
But I think, well, it's fun. But on people. I don't go out just trolling people for fun. But if someone's if I know that they're trying to get an angle on me, trolling for sure.
That's good to know. I'm going to keep that in mind during our discussion.
No.
I'm kidding.
All right, we ready to start?
Yes.
Well, I think we already did, but you can put this to the front. So
well, yeah, we gotta do the official welcome though. Welcome to Yogi and the Beach Man. Today we have Dr. Schafer Sedron back with us today. Dr. Sedron, I can't speak today. Dr. Sedron is a mom, board certified neurologist, Jay Shetty life coach, musician, writer, podcaster, and a publisher. Welcome back, Dr. Schafer.
Thank you so much for having me back on the show. It's really nice to be with you and to be with both of you this time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I didn't.
You missed that podcast.
Listening to the podcast, and that's why I feel like I've met you already, because I remember listening and really telling Jim, wow, I wish I could have made it. I really enjoyed that talk that you had. And so good. I'm glad we get to finally meet.
Yeah.
Officially.
Me too. Thank you for having me back.
Thank you for being with us. We greatly appreciate it. So we've been doing this new thing since you've been on our podcast where kind of towards the end, we've been asking people, what are you doing to make the world a better place? So I'm going to ask you that right off the bat. So,
Okay.
all right, Dr. Schafer Sedron, what are you doing to make the world a better place?
Well, I think right now, you shouldn't speak for other people, but I think everyone today, because we're in election week, I think everyone making the world a better place today is just, no matter how you feel about what's happened, is just showing up and doing what you believe in, right? And showing up for
Yeah.
people who, whether you agree with them or not, might be hurting. And so for me this week, I spent a lot of time making sure that I was putting content out into our ecosystem of podcasting and media. I went on the news and talked about the emotional toll of the political process and things like that. So that's something specific to this moment in time that we're all experiencing from and trying to navigate this week. But something that's been really important that's been going on in my personal life with my family recently is my daughter is actually releasing her third book, Wolf Tales, next week. So we've been doing a lot of media, book tours, discussions, not only about the book, which is called Wolf Tales, but also about her fundraising for wildlife, as well as fundraising for the Humane Society with her fourth book that'll come out next year. So a lot of life has been really kind of the opposite of politics lately. It's been the snuggly, nice, warm stuff like children's literature and talking about books and philanthropy and raising money for animals. So that's been really wonderful to kind of immerse ourselves in that environment when the world's been going maybe a little in another direction, different temperature.
Yeah. So I follow you on Facebook, and your daughter's become quite a celebrity. She's been on the news or different TV shows outside of Michigan too, right? You guys are traveling the country?
Yeah, she was on Good Day DC, and then she was on CBS in Boston. And she was in Detroit, which is, of course, in Michigan. And she has some other really exciting dates coming up, too. She was on a program. This one's really cool. She was on a program called Kidlit TV. And what they do is they have authors and illustrators on the show, and they maybe read their books or discuss their books. And then they stream that online so you and I could go watch it. But also the idea is to get this really amazing material into libraries and into schools. So they reach over 800,000 schools. So that's a really cool thing she did. And Craig Melvin from the Today Show, who had released his own book this year, he was there reading his book on the program at the same time, as well as some other really amazing authors and personalities and people who are involved in philanthropy like her. So not only was it a really neat experience for her and her public speaking and her ability to share her story and her mission, but to just be there with these adults that are making similar choices and seeing the possibilities for her and learning from them. Because, someone like Craig Melvin, he's on the Today Show every day, right? His skills are impeccable for speaking and engagement. So it was such a cool experience for her. And then we left, and on the way back to the hotel to pick up our things so that we could jet back home, because we were there for less than 24 hours. We passed by an animal shelter and of course had to scurry right in there and see the animals too. So it was a great experience.
That's so cool. I don't know if you know, Rick, but her daughter, is she still 10 or has she had a birthday?
Well, remember,
she's 10.
10 years old.
Last week I had confused, remember?
Yeah.
And I asked another guest, I'm like, oh, and how's your daughter with her book writing stuff? And Jim's like, no. wrong doctor. I'm like, okay, sorry about that.
She had a great answer though. She goes, well, if my dogs write a book.
Yeah. So no, that was on my list. I'm glad you brought it up, because that was on my list to ask you about how your daughter is doing. Well, what a great experience for a 10-year-old, and have that confidence and that self-esteem, and it's just a great character build.
Yeah, she goes up and answers questions.
Good for her.
I mean, she's just sitting there by herself. Her mom's not holding her hand. I mean,
just owning it.
No, that was the first time she ever did a big media spot. Was here in Northern Michigan. Great program, 9 and 10. And I report for them too. I do a wellness segment every Wednesday or every other Wednesday, usually with them. And so she goes, it's her first opportunity to speak to the media, and they were going to mic us both up. And she looked at me and she said, Mom, I want you to be here, but I want to go up by myself. And it was such a cool moment as a parent to feel like, okay, you know what I mean? This is your first time doing this, and you feel like you want me here, which of course, for safety, I'm always there. On those shots where you don't see me, I'm just off of camera sight, but I'm in the room at all times. I think that's really important. I learned that from Taylor Swift's mom. But but she wanted to do from the very beginning, she felt empowered and capable of doing that by herself. And I just think that's precious and amazing. I'm so proud of her.
Sure. That is so cool.
Yeah, definitely. So she's got a lot going on. You're there by her side, running all over the place. What did she do? I mean, she's got so much going in the works. How do you manage all that?
I just find, and I feel like you and I have talked about this before, that when you lean into your passion, it all kind of works out and makes sense, right? It's not tiring, it's inspiring. And so I find in this season of life, it's almost like when you're trying to do things that aren't in alignment with your joy and your purpose, it's like swimming. It's a lot of effort, and you're just trying to make sure you keep your head above water. Whereas I imagine it's more like surfing when you're really doing what you're meant to do and that you're finding joy in and purpose in, because you're above the water. You're not dealing with that amount of friction. So you can go so much further with such less energy. So I feel like because we're living in such alignment and we're so passionate, we're going further. And then when you are living that way, I think the universe conspires in your favor, right? You do one thing and then an opportunity comes up. And it's funny because I know social media can be really dangerous, but I really kind of love social media because I go on and all of a sudden I see a young author that my daughter would love to connect with, or, I come across a show, or I see someone who's doing amazing work that should be on my show. So I feel like at this season of my life, I'm just seeing opportunities. Whereas years ago, life felt very different. I saw a lot of challenges, and I'm so grateful for that different perspective and to have the energy I have now to take advantage of these opportunities.
Yeah, I totally feel that.
Yeah, that's so cool that as a father of 3 daughters, and Jim's got 2, so we got 5 daughters between us. It just, you had mentioned, you're always in the room, and that was how it always was with Megan, with me, my youngest one. And because my older 2 are stepdaughters, I mean, I was always protective of them too. I didn't, but they were older, but just to have that, I'm glad that like when Megan was on between like 7th and 8th grade, and 8th and 9th grade. Those are formidable years. I really wanted to make sure she hung out with the right people. So I'm like, you're not just chilling out for the summer and doing your thing. You were going to go get you some kind of volunteer work. And she went to the Fish and Wildlife Commission. She would go out on their boats and catch seine in the boats and go on manatee rescues, come back in and do data entry in her computer for science. And just to have that discipline. And I always kind of geared her toward the science and math field. And now she's in her master's program to be MSN, or a master's in science and nursing. 1 semester left. And so,
well, congratulations to her.
Your daughter's right on that way too, of that positive mindset that it takes. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. And, I produce a podcast for her. It's called What's Up, Young Authors. And she interviews both young authors and illustrators like herself, but she also will interview what we call mentor authors. So children's literature authors that are grownups like us. And it's really interesting because, you are what you surround yourself with, right? You're the sum of what you surround yourself with. And it's so cool to, in the situation we're in, where we live in northern Michigan, right? There aren't that many human beings here. There aren't that many programs here for a kid to be involved in.
Pretty small place.
It's a small, it's an underpopulated region of the country. and there aren't necessarily always things to do. And in the winter, it's winter here 6 months of the year. I mean, there can be packed snow, it's limiting in some ways. But through her podcast and through her writing, she has opportunities to have these really amazing conversations with people that she'd never have. She had, I think one of her favorite ones was with a therapist in Canada who authored a book called A Rainbow of Feelings, I believe, Caitlin Seguin. And it's a beautiful book trying to gift the understanding of emotions, embracing them so that you can regulate them and not just stuff them, right? Because so many of us in our generation were taught, stuff those feelings, do not feel them, they're bad. Exactly. Bad feelings. And that didn't work very well. So fortunately, we have a new generation of therapists that are doing the work to try to give emotions their day in the sun that they deserve and make sure that we are expressing them and really processing them. So it was so cool to see Amelie and Caitlin talking, and unique to be there for that discussion, because when our kids are at school or when they're talking to their friends, we're not necessarily there for those talks. To be next to her producing the show and to hear this conversation and have her say, I actually would like to be a therapist. I think I might end up being a therapist, because she's inspired by this person and appreciative of what they do. And she sees it not from the perspective of a patient, but from a totally different, almost collegial perspective. So that's a really neat opportunity. And to get to witness it firsthand as a parent is even better.
Yeah, I can imagine. Going through my mind here is that I don't know if the name of it is Therapist or Psychotherapy or something like that. It's a show. I think it's on Apple. Have you seen that series?
No, I'm going to write it down.
You mentioned a new form of therapy, and this guy takes it to a whole new level. But the show
what's it called?
I want to say it's therapy or the
really,
therapist or psychotherapy or just something like
you'll
that.
figure out pretty quick.
But
type
it
in
is
TH in the
so
Apple search bar.
Funny. Yeah.
Oh, it's a comedy?
And it's a podcast.
It's a comedy. Yeah. No, it's not a podcast. It's just a show.
It's a show.
A sitcom
Yeah.
or something?
Yeah, sitcom. But his approach to therapy was just off the wall, but it worked. Yes.
Well, I got a call earlier when we first talked before we started. We were talking about a little bit about the current events, obviously going on right now with the election and whatnot. And Jim was like, "Well, maybe not on the." But this came up today, and I had no real good answer. That same daughter of mine, Megan, calls me. She goes, "Dad, I don't know what to do about Katie, her best friend since they've been 4 years old. They're both a week apart, 31 years old." So they've been friends their entire life. Katie, diehard Kamala supporter. I shouldn't say her names, but my daughter's friend, diehard Kamala supporter. Megan, a little more conservative, like her dad. Katie, using very passive aggressiveness and TikToks and stuff, has basically told Megan she doesn't know how she can be friends with her anymore since she voted for Trump, and Megan and won't really even speak to her about anything now. And I wish I wouldn't have mentioned her name, and has done some other kind of stuff that doesn't make sense and worrisome of threats that are really just would never happen. So she goes, "Dad, how do I even get her to open up to me?" She's just giving me the cold shoulder saying, who could vote for misogynistic, rapist, racist? I mean, has all these things who are going to take my rights away as a woman. So she's totally down, has the woke mind virus, and is alienating herself from her best friend and some other friends because of that political situation. And I really didn't know how to tell Megan what to do, other than maybe use some kind of passive aggressive type. Hey, maybe we can not talk about this anymore. But Katie is just really taking it to the next level. And I don't know what to, I mean,
I think he's looking for advice.
Yeah, in a broader sense. I mean, you had said that you've had, people this has been super polarizing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and now it's time to not be polarized and maybe come back together. We all want the same thing in the end, right? We all want to be prosperous and happy and keep more of our money and be left alone and that kind of things. And we all want those and keep all our rights together. But it's super polarized. So how should she maybe take the next step to open up that dialogue?
I think listening is where it starts, because I think that a big issue we have, you have to understand our system is set up for disagreement because it's two parties, right? It's party A or party B. So it's a setup for exactly what's happening. And statistically speaking, it's not surprising that one feels one way and the other feels the other way. And because of our very polarized climate, I think the knee-jerk reflexive reaction would be that, okay, you came to me with sarcasm and you're saying all these things about me that hurt my feelings. I don't feel you're trying to understand me. So I'm going to respond in kind, right? My mirror neurons are going to start firing, and you're this way to me, I'm going to be that way to you. But that's just going to kind of escalate the situation and not get to a place of healing, or what I think the main issue is, which is understanding these are two people who voted for very different people and very different platforms, and they don't understand one another. And I think a mistake we often make in these sorts of discussions is that we enter them as if it's an argument. And in an argument, there's a winner and a loser, or so we think, versus entering into it as a discussion with someone we love, where we're seeking to understand one another and we're not seeking to change the other person's opinions. We're just seeking to understand one another. And so if it were me in that conversation and I wanted to repair that and retain that relationship, I'd really try to focus on active listening and even use the words, I want to understand how you're feeling. I want to understand your position and why it's important to you. And I want to feel understood by you. How can we make steps to get there? And I can't answer that question. Only these two beautiful friends that love each other so much, only they can take those steps incrementally to try to repair after that.
Yeah, there's three girls. They all grew up together on the same street. They're all within a year to Katie, Megan, close to each other. Other friend is like just a few months apart, and they're all girls. They're all still friends. So, and I was talking to the third girl's father just last Sunday, and I'm like, man, it is so great that Katie and Megan and Kristen still are friends after all these years, and they're best friends. I mean, they all hang out together, make sure they go. One's married, has a couple kids. The other, my daughter doesn't have any kids, but's married, and Katie's single. But they have different lives, but they still make time for each other and have. And Megan's really worried that that's just going to get wrecked. I will give her that advice and just try to just kind of open up some dialogue that way.
Yeah. I think we all, honestly, when it comes to love, I mean, that's why we become friends with people. We don't love people because of how they dress or their job or, their titles. We love them because out of all these billions of human beings on the world, this person seems to see and understand us, right? That's what love is. So when that's put to threat, that's really scary. So not only does this person feel scared because on a national and potentially global stage, they feel threatened. What they expected didn't happen, et cetera. Now, also something that's really important to them, friendships, which I think by the time you're our age, we know that friendships are absolutely precious and they don't come easily. Old friendships are really important and hard to find. So now for this individual, for both of them, sounds from what you're saying, they both feel that they may lose something that's really important to them. So I think trying to focus on reconnecting and then go from there, because when they're in that, it's like kids too. And that's not to belittle either of these people at all. But we have to understand that we're kind of like kids when we get really, really upset about something. We have to get out of that before we can have the conversation. So honestly, this week may not even be the right time to have the conversation because a lot of people are they're just feeling upset, and they're allowed to have those feelings, right? We need to kind of give them some space to do that too.
Yeah. For me, I was so excited. I mean, my candidate came in third. I mean, that's like the bronze medal in pickleball.
It is.
Well,
Well,
they
I think
say
everyone
that the
else got
gold,
it wrong. If you voted for Kamala or if you voted for Trump, then you're still voting for the corrupt two-party system. Come on. But over 500,000 people now
Jim,
went
if you
for the
want to
Green
bait me
Party.
into a political debate, I will take it all day long.
Oh,
I
I know
love the
you will.
topics. So don't
Well,
get started and don't start me unless you want to get started.
you know what they say though about the gold medalists in the Olympics?
What's that?
They're the least happy person of them all.
Sometimes that's true. Or the richest
So
people are
Why
sometimes
is that?
happy too.
So psychologically, there's this phenomenon that when people win gold, it's usually not very satisfying. And the people who actually win silver or bronze, they won a medal, which is really exciting, right? They got something for everything they've put into it, but they still also have this goal ahead of them. When you've been working really long towards a goal and all of a sudden you just won it and it's over, that can actually be kind of a slightly traumatizing experience as well for your psyche. So, interestingly enough, sometimes winning the gold isn't always the very best thing that could happen to us either.
I mean, you're the doctor, but I know from my personal experience,
You like the gold.
that's never been my problem. I don't want to be second or third, ever.
If you're not first, you're last.
I want to, right. You got winner and first loser, and that's but I'm really competitive, just the same way. I mean, well, we grew up playing sports and we're guys, so but I could see that. I could see that. Where you would still want to have that that person to beat, another goal ahead of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so important when you are talking about things like mindset and goals. And I think it's easier for us to understand this the more life we've experienced to make sure that you're competing against yourself. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, correct.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I mean, I'm still working. I'm a sales guy. I do cover my area for the past 10, 12 years. And I'm always looking at last year's numbers and okay, I did this and 10% more is this, and this is where I got to be. And it's always chasing that. And that doesn't matter whether I'm doing work or on the golf course. You know, you always want to do better. For you.
Well, I think that's where it's, the passion comes.
I'm different.
You feel
I'm different.
differently?
I don't care about money. I've never chased the dollar.
No, I don't mean it. I don't mean it like that. I mean, just the goal. I'm really not a big materialistic guy either, but I do want to know where I'm at. I do need to know how much money I need to make.
Yeah.
You know,
I never want to see my check. I never want to see the bank account.
You just don't care.
I just don't care.
Well,
I just want to do good work and
well, not all of us are blessed with Abbeys in our lives.
Yeah, my wife takes care of all of everything. So she does. I am blessed.
If she would like to take over all my financial, I would trust her with all of them. So maybe we can talk about that later.
That's another.
You would want to know.
No, as long as
You'd be all right with not knowing how much you make or where you're at, or
as long as I never had to worry about it, I'd be totally fine with that. As long as I can go spend $100 whenever I want, and the check ain't bouncing, I'm good, and all my bills are paid. I'd be totally fine with that. This is an
interesting experiment. I feel like, I foresee some journals and, some data collecting on this. I think this could be really interesting, like a force. No, you have to give this up and then kind of see where it goes and see what it triggers in you with regards to kind of some dissonance there when having to relinquish that. I'd be curious.
Well, we have to get Abby's okay on this if she wants another job.
I don't think she wants to handle your
in addition
finances.
to taking care of her husband. Hey, Rick wants you to take care of him too.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if that's gonna. I love her, and I think she likes me, so maybe she will. We'll let you know.
Well, you could always have Carrie do it.
No, I could, but that's probably not something I would do.
Okay.
And that's where we get to the interesting part. But we're not going to life coach you on your show on air. We're not going to do that.
Come on, yeah.
Hey, why not?
It's a little warm in here to begin with, and now I can actually feel. As soon as Jim said that, I'm like, man, you put me on the spot. Carrie's going to listen. I'm going to get an argument.
You have a lot of bleeping. You've already name dropped a little bit on this episode. You've got some bleeping to do in the post.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I'm working with all of it.
Yeah.
But getting back to Katie and Megan, I mean, Katie's like my fourth daughter. So so I'm going to recommend, for your advice, that I talk to Meg, say, hey, Meg, first of all, back off. Give her a week, 10 days. She'll reach out to you, and then just listen and shut up.
Yeah.
Because she's fairly outspoken. My ex-wife calls her Little Ricky because she's
Megan is outspoken.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When she has a belief and she can defend, she's educated. She can defend her positions very well. So she's good to debate with her.
Yeah. And I guess the question is when we have these conflicts with people we love, because we're smart and we have a position and we can defend it, right? We've got all the data. It's easy to kind of get stuck in that continued adversarial, fact-driven space when genuinely, when it comes to the people you love, they don't want you to change their mind. They don't want you to defend their position. They just want to feel heard and understood, right? And kind of let that stuff go and get back to the whole we love each other part.
And you're never gonna. I mean, you're gonna waste a lot of energy trying to change that mind, and it's never. You're just literally running on a treadmill uphill. Now, you may plant a seed or a conversation in a month to plant a second seed, and maybe steer someone's mindset to something that you could influence with patience and tact. And facts, if I'm right.
I don't know anymore about facts. Those seem to get changed all the time.
Well, no, we've talked about this abstract too. Ghibli, well, I don't want to go there. But no, there is definitely facts. There's right, there's wrong, there's facts, there's fiction, and there's truth, and there's lies.
I could debate that all night too, but
well, and I think that's kind of how people are feeling on both sides, or all three, as you said, all three sides of this equation. I think when it is so polarized as it has been, kind of increasingly so over the years, when it's all said and done and the dust settles, it's just this kind of like, I don't understand. And when we don't understand, we just feel lost and alone and afraid. And I don't know if you've spent any time on social media the last 48 hours, but
not really.
People feel scared, but more than anything, the sensation I get is people don't understand. So again, I think that's a really great when you take a step back and you say, okay, where can we start now? Because we can't make everyone happy or satisfied. We can't. We know that. Like, no matter what happened, a good portion of people would be unhappy. But how can we move forward to try to reconnect with our neighbors and with our loved ones so that we can move forward and have a more cohesive front, right? Because nobody wants a civil war. We do want to be one nation. But
absolutely.
Well, there's other people that would like a civil war.
Well,
but throwing mud at each other isn't going to be.
We're talking about.
Yeah. Throwing mud at each other is not the way to get there, right? So it's just like, let's just understand each other, take down the temperature, and then move forward. And as you said, spend the time together to rebuild that trust and go forward. Because these are long-term friendships and family members, right? Like, we've formed these bonds over a really long period of time. And if we want to remain invested in that relationship, we have to be willing to continue that moving forward. But we can't do that if we're coming at it from a point of you're wrong, I'm right, and I don't want to understand you. That's kind of a non-starter for anyone on any side of this equation.
Yeah, well, because 2 days ago when they'd have discussions, they would have discussions, which would escalate. But I mean, they would be driving around, they're stuck together, they're going to talk it through. But then since it happened, now she's just off the deep end. But no, what you said is all, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Especially the cooling off period, and just tell her to back off and listen. take her out to lunch and don't talk about it.
Well, I wish them the best and healing and
Thanks.
repair of their relationship. It sounds like a really important one to them and to you as well.
She's like my fourth daughter. I've always called her my fourth daughter.
And that's hard
I can hear her coming in my like, hello, Richard. That's what she'd always say. Hello, Richard. Like, you're the only one who calls me Richard. I know Richard.
Yeah. I'm definitely in that seat of not understanding, but I don't feel lost and I don't feel scared. You know, I for a long time, I haven't understood why people keep voting for a two corrupt party system. I mean, it's like, oh, I got to vote for the lesser of two evils. Why do you got to keep voting for evil? I mean, that didn't work this time. If you were a Democrat, it didn't work at all.
What didn't work?
Voting for Kamala. It didn't work. She lost. She got blown out of the water. So it's like, why not just abandon the Democratic Party now? They're not working.
Well, because everybody
it's not functional, and look for something else.
I'm sure the doctor here is probably more qualified to answer it than me, but people want to be on their teams.
That's true. It's true.
They want to have their squads and their teams and part of the group. And I've always been on the outside of the group because I'm certainly not a player in the Republican group, and I'm certainly not a Democrat. But I don't want to be that group. But this time I just happen to align more because it is different this time. You don't have a career, someone who spent 40 years in government running for president in this case. And if you keep bringing it up, I'll keep talking about it all night on this. But it's not the same. There's definitely two corrupt systems. But in this case, there was not two corrupt people running.
It's fascinating how other countries in the world will have, 12 or 13 parties running. And I think it's really interesting because I do think that prevents some of this team mentality that you were bringing up. Because when you're voting for a team, it's kind of like your football team. Let's say you like football, as many Americans do. And I mean American football for those listening outside of America. So if you love an American team, after a while, that's not based on reason. It's not based on their stats, their statistics. It's not based on good things they do in the community. It's just an affiliation that is kind of woven into the fabric of who you are. Maybe your parents watch these games with you, or it's where you're from. So there was a day every week during season where you'd get to wear a jersey to school. So of course you had a jersey, right? Because you wanted to fit in and be cool. And it just takes on a life of its own and has nothing to do with if you went out with those guys on that team or the person who owned the team, who was making money off of that enterprise, and you actually got to know these people. Would you want to support them? I mean, we'll never know, but a lot of these people are really diehard fans of things that they don't fully understand. And I think that is something that comes up when we do have these kind of tribal pack mentalities, is that we can subscribe to things that we don't necessarily fully understand. So I think it's fascinating when every term you've got 12, 13 parties on the ballot, where I live part-time in the Czech Republic. And I can't remember because I don't vote there, but I can't remember what the race was. Maybe it was a Senate race, I think. And there were people on the ballot, I believe it was last year, and they were running as aliens, like that they believed in aliens. And it was a genuine party on the ballot. My husband's like, okay, I got my ballot. And it's like this thick of all this information about these parties. And one of them was basically a group of people who believed in aliens. And they would even in Prague, they would stage these demonstrations where they'd be dressed up as aliens. They'd be talking about how they're coming and be, vote for us because you'll be prepared because you'll be on the right side. I mean, it was just amazing. And people
so cool.
they kind of thought it was a joke.
We're trying to get a flat earth guy on.
They kind of thought it was a joke. But then it was kind of like, no, maybe they're serious. It was this really intriguing thing, and it may seem really silly, and it, in fact, probably was. But it was also just really interesting. And I think having that silly thing going on, no, not to disparage anyone who wanted to vote for them. Sorry, guys, you do your thing. That's
We
fine.
just lost
But
two of our Czech listeners.
sorry if you wanted to vote for them. I
They
don't
were in that
remember the name
alien
of the
party.
party. But it kind of allowed a lightheartedness to the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Or maybe they were just trolling and having fun.
Yeah.
Maybe,
That's a lot of work
maybe
to be trolling.
But when
it
you
was a
can,
lot of work and money, but
Yeah.
when you can pick up 2-3% of a vote in a parliamentary system where you have 10, 12, 15 parties, it's all about coalition, and you can have some whack job party like that have a little bit of power or get appointed to a cabinet, or not a cabinet, a good committee or something. You never know.
Yeah.
I don't
But
think they
parliamentary
were.
systems have their weaknesses, and as you can look, all you have to do is look up, not far from you, just look right over to Justin Trudeau and with his 13% support in Canada, and without the parliamentary system they have, would have been gone months and months and months ago.
Yeah. You know, you're from Michigan, and you're not, I don't think you're originally from Michigan, but you're there. And I mean, Michigan State, University of Michigan, I mean, you have to be one or the other in Michigan. And
Oh,
I've known
yeah.
people from like both sides that won't talk to other people on the other side, or they won't wear green, or they won't wear blue. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's that serious. And it's that kind of
Yeah.
mentality that, I mean, we're kind of indoctrinated in at an early age, and it kind of spreads to politics.
Yeah, it's
You're either
true.
blue or you're red.
I don't think it spreads to politics, but I do think that I would not wear a Kansas City Chiefs jersey ever if you could bought me one.
But would you wear
I
those
won't-
colors?
I won't wear a concert t-shirt unless I've seen the band.
Okay. But what about just having that color?
The color?
Yeah.
Well, of course.
I mean, I know people from Michigan who will never wear green, and I know people from state that will never wear
Well,
blue.
that's just being silly.
Yeah.
That's just being
saying.
irrational. I'm sure it's
But-
kind of a small percentage of people.
But
that
I
are
feel
like
that same irrationalism bleeds into politics. You know?
Sure. Well, I'm from Indiana. I'm a Hoosier.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because being a Hoosier in Michigan is not that popular, even though they like the tourism dollars, because a lot of Hoosiers come up to Michigan to enjoy the natural beauty. And
Michigan
potentially
people like
move there.
Hoosiers much better than Buckeyes. So
Yes.
come on up.
Exactly.
Come up and
Exactly.
spend
So
your
then
money.
it goes into the Buckeyes and the Ohio and this
Right.
Midwest, a trifecta. And it's like, it's so fascinating. And it's not even just in the US. When I'm in Prague, my husband will wear an IU zip up. And I don't think there's a better way to say a zip up, but he'll wear, you can tell how much I love sports. He'll wear something with IU on it, Indiana University, and people will either boo at you or yell for you in the middle of Prague. Like, what? It's so far reaching. It is quite tribal, and it's fascinating
Yeah.
because community can bring really great things.
Mhm.
But if we're kind of going into mob mentality, then that's like, okay, let's put our hazard lights on. Let's bring down the temperature, because now this isn't community anymore, right? This is
Right.
kind of a fervor. So no matter what you subscribe to, whether it's university, a political party, whatever, if you feel yourself kind of getting neurologically triggered by something, that's just time to take the temperature, take a beat, and then come back with your frontal lobes when they're back online. Because when we're that upset, when we're that disappointed, our frontal lobes, they're offline. They're not a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
I have one friend, one acquaintance, and if their team loses, specifically in one case, the New York Yankees, when they lost in the World Series, his wife told me, she says, he is miserable. I literally will not be able to speak with him for like at least 2 to 3 days. Same situation with another friend of mine and the University of Michigan football team. I was like, not quite that bad, but I remember about 25 years ago, I was a big Red Wing fan. We both grew up in Detroit, and the Red Wings went deep into the playoffs. And when they lost, and I was still in Detroit at the time, I felt empty. I felt like someone had the same thing I had felt like at funerals or when I lost. And then I'm like, man, this just really sucks. I'm like, was really emotional about that. And I didn't see anything wrong with it. And then an hour later, I'm watching the news or something, and I see the hockey team, the Red Wings, that I have had so much of my life invested in. They're live with the guys from the Red Wings at this bar. We'll talk about, and they're all drinking beer, partying. You know, they got girls on their laps, and they're playing ping pong and putting and dancing.
It's a job. Yeah, it's a job.
I was, yeah, and I'm like, wait a minute. These guys don't care as much as I care. Why? And at that moment, a switch flicked. And I said, I will never, ever, ever do that again. Ever. I just don't care. And I think it was a big lesson. But to see these, some people take that, whether it's politics or sports teams or whatever, to just have that affect your personal relationships with someone that you love. It just is.
It's sad.
It is sad. And but I think the first step is just recognizing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sometimes you need to get bitch slapped to recognize it, like I was that time on Channel 7 out in Detroit, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think something that could help along that line, and it's something I actually recommended on my is going in the media and trying to give kind of ahead of the curve guidance to try to help people stay out of that triggered state as they're going into election season and as they're going to vote and right after, and they're coping with the fallout of whatever happens. If we can, when we're looking into politics, make sure our sources are fact-based and they're not emotion-driven. They're not, trying to kind of get an emotional response out of us to then be able to manipulate us. Because once you have someone triggered, then you can kind of, you can direct them more readily. Because again, their frontal lobes, their higher reasoning offline, right? Yeah. So if you are accessing a media source to get information that is going to trigger you, even if it's a media source that is in alignment with your values, right? So if it's a media source that gosh, they really get me hyped up every time, it might be an interesting exercise to take a step back and be like, but I know when I get emotional, I can be manipulated. So even though I trust this station and I agree with them, I'm going to try reading news that, there are different ways to find news that is non-biased and it's just giving you information. I'm just going to look at that for the next month and see how I feel. And that way you're making educated decisions without kind of putting yourself in that situation where you're more readily manipulated because you've been triggered because it's been designed that way. And kind of to speak to the bigger picture of why I think it's so hard for us to move on, even though for most of us, now people will be affected by every election cycle. Changes will be made that affect real human beings. So we should not minimize that. That is true. But for the vast majority of people, their lives will continue on, right? They will potentially have kids, change jobs, move.
Life goes on.
Life goes on. So I think it's really important to recognize, though, when you have a situation like we do now, where things are so emotional and so polarized, that we are kind of setting people up for this emotional fallout. Like, you don't get your kids all worked up, and then when they're like, oh, afterwards say like, why are you doing that? I'm like, well, because you just worked them up for bedtime, Dad. Why'd you do that? You know what I mean? Like, it's a natural consequence of going through that roller coaster. So I think we as a culture can't be that mad at people or misunderstand them when they're exhausted after something like an election cycle or any other really emotional thing, like with the hurricanes that we had recently. That was just horrible, even for people who are disconnected from it. I can't even imagine what it's like for people in Florida and in the Southeast. People need to recover from those experiences. It's not nothing, right?
Yeah. Well, and a lot of these, when you get social media involved with, getting back to the team thing, you get in your own echo chamber. You get inside the algorithms. And if you're along this line, if you start looking at, funny cat videos for a week, all you're going to get in your feed from YouTube or Instagram is funny cat videos. If you start looking at different political leanings and go there, that's what they're going to feed. And part of social media's job is to manipulate and steer, and that continues to happen. And if you stay in that echo chamber and don't realize you're in it, that's dangerous. One thing Megan said to me today, she goes, Dad, I'm in two algorithms. I have one Instagram algorithm on my laptop that I only go to this side, and I have another on my phone so I can see both sides and see how they are both trying to manipulate me from different angles. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, whoa, well, that's pretty cool. And but that's a neat thought experiment to put that out there and see. But it takes a lot of work to do that. Mm-hmm. And you have to care. I kind of do, because I like seeing how I'm being manipulated and where, and like to recognize propaganda when I see it and know when I'm being propagandized. But to convince other folks that, hey, would you at least be open to the fact that you might be getting propagandized? Oh, no, of course not. I'm not being propagandized. But it's much easier. What's that saying? It's much easier to fool somebody than to convince them they've been fooled. And so it's hard to recognize when you're in that echo chamber and in that social media whirlpool of negativity that it's just keeping you going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's hard to get out of that.
Yeah. And I think it circles back to what I'm passionate about, which is mastering your own mindset and really getting really firm on your boundaries. Because once you're firm on your boundaries and do that difficult work of exploring who you are, what you value, what you believe in, and kind of disentangling yourself from all of these things that you've just kind of picked up and now they're stuck on you, and you walk around on this earth as if they are actually a part of you, but they're just stuck to you, these ideas and values that don't belong.
Boundaries. What were you saying about boundaries? Back up 30 seconds. What?
Yeah. So boundaries, when you're on this mindset journey, and so now you imagine you're this person, you're just covered in all these beliefs and thoughts, and we call them limiting beliefs, where they're the kind of the things that keep you from doing what you want to do because it's this negative voice in your head. It's not your voice, right? It's a voice you picked up when you were a kid or when you were in school, when you're in college, that's saying, you're not good enough for that. You can't do that, right? But when we do the work to identify our stumbling blocks, and then once our head is clear and we're not surrounded by negative thoughts, then when we start to differentiate ourselves, me from you, you have your opinion and your stance, I have mine. Because we're interrelating, we can influence one another, but we can't control one another. And we seek to understand one another rather than, if someone's trying to control me, counter control. And it all comes down to boundaries. And when you have really firm boundaries on who you are, it's much more difficult to manipulate you. And it's much more difficult to get you to slide into that dysregulation that you feel when something doesn't go your way, because you say, nope, there's that thing. It's over there. It didn't go my way, but I'm still me. And I learned from this experience. And now I'm going to move forward with what I learned, and I'm going to do even better. Right.
Use it for ammunition and to make yourself better in the future. Yeah. Exactly.
That's a great word, dysregulation.
I like it.
That incorporates so much.
That'd be a good band name.
Dysregulation. I like that. Well, I think and I often say it's basically like, I determine my weather. You do not dictate my weather. You can come by as a tornado, because a lot of people are kind of like tornadoes. But that's you. Yeah. That's not me. I don't have to get sucked into it. And that's, again, getting dysregulated by someone else instead of saying, nope, boundaries. this is my life and my body, and I'm going to stay firm in who I am. And once we get there, then everything we encounter from a more regulated, calm state of being, and then frontal lobes still online. Even if things don't go our way, we can say, and next, what are we going to do?
Yeah. It's really interesting. I recently had a listener send me, who's also a friend that I really like a lot, sent me a video, and it was a very compelling video on the fact, put that in parentheses, that there's no such thing as climate change or global warming. And it had all these compelling reasons of, all these different things that are just showing that, no, it's absolutely not, it's not what everybody's telling us. And I'm bringing this up because you talked about looking at the facts of different things. So then I thought, okay, well, I listened to it. It's a possibility. Let's see who's funding this. So I look into who's funding this movie, and it turns out it's big oil and the tobacco companies who have used the same company to also persuade people, that other things aren't bad as they seem either, like smoking cigarettes, for example, So it's interesting that, trying to find facts in this country about different things is almost impossible. I mean, it's like a lifelong journey just to try to find out a fact.
But that's just not
because we're
correct,
so
Jim.
manipulated.
It's not true.
Okay, where do you go to find the
We argue
facts?
about this
You
all
can't
the
go to
time.
CNN. You can't go to
don't
Fox. You
have to
can't
say-
go to
no,
MSN,
that's true.
NBC.
Because those
So where do you find
those
facts?
news media outlets have lied to all of us.
Right.
So you certainly cannot trust the corporate pharmaceutical company paid for networks to get you the truth all the time.
I'm in agreement.
But you can certainly get your data from raw sources. So if you hear a sound bite on the news, no matter what it is, and you hear it, and then that provokes an emotional response in you, that is designed to be propaganda. So before you're influenced by that and get that emotional response, take a deep breath, go back to the source. Now, if you hear that person say what they said in context, now you have the facts, not being manipulated by someone else's opinion. Now, getting back to your global warming scene, there's so many nuances to that issue. Is global warming happening? Perhaps. Is it man-made caused? Perhaps, but doubtful. Now that's where you come into the facts of what is the causes of this thing. So you just can't lay out such a broad, nuanced subject like, is global warming and this happening or not? And this report that you read is financed by these people. Certainly they have influence on that report. And great, that's the first place that I would look to, who's paying for it. But you have to look at all the angles and get down to on those type of subjects, you really have to get specific in what you're asking. So when you get the answer you're looking for, not like what's causing global warming. That is a different answer than is man-made global warming happening? Those are two completely different questions with completely different answers.
Well, I hear you and I agree with you, but my point is to try to find out all the facts on that.
Well,
all the data, all the statistics on everything.
If you were going to look up global
overwhelming
facts, you would just have to find out what your study would be and figure out what is the carbon emissions of this and how does it affect that and what it was in the past and in the future.
And then who put out that study? Is it legit? I mean, it's overwhelming.
Jim, scientific numbers are what they are. So if you measure the temperature of your pool right now and it's 83 degrees, that's what it is. Would you agree that that's a fact?
Yes, Rick.
Would you agree that facts exist?
What I'm
saying and can be gotten?
Yes. What I'm saying is you don't know who put those numbers out and they're not always reliable.
I can see through that bullshit.
Okay.
So if I just can because
we're really ignoring, I guess, Jeremy.
Well, I don't know if you're being entertained.
I'm here for it. I'm just enjoying every
we talk
interesting moment of it.
Because when Jim argues things, he throws out very broad generalities. And
And that triggers you.
It doesn't really trigger me. It makes me want to hold him to the fire for his sometimes nonsensical arguments. So to say that that there's no such thing as facts is just plain fallacy and silly. Or that you can't find out what facts are. I totally disagree, because if you know where their sources are and know where to find them, and people that you trust or sources that you trust, or can just go to that person and listen to their conversation or their statements in context, there's your facts. So I don't know why you say that you're so against the existence of them.
Did I say that?
Yes, many times.
Okay.
Maybe not tonight, but you've said that many times over the last few months, and to me, it's just nonsensical. I don't get it.
Okay, there's been a lot of things that people on this planet have thought were facts for a long time, and then all of a sudden,
true.
Guess that's not a fact,
right? Like that, the vaccine doesn't cause transmission or stop transmission. That's a fact, but it wasn't 4 years ago. Unless you knew where to find out to get that data, which I did.
Which is my point, which is going to be really difficult to find out all the stuff. I mean, it's kind of overwhelming to try to find out.
Right, now we're getting back to semantics, but the fact remains, that those facts do exist. Whether you bring lied to or not, and accept those lies as truth, is really up to you or not. So, all right, let's move on.
Well, I think it's really interesting. So one thing that you said, Rick, about when you're listening, if you're feeling an emotion come up, I call that a trigger detector. So when I work with people, it's like, ooh, if you're on the beach with your metal detector and it goes off, do you drop it in the sand and run away? No, you're like, oh, that's interesting. It's beeping. Something's there. And so you brought up something really interesting. You said, well, if I feel an emotion triggered, someone's pushing that button, right? There's an intention there. Why is that intention there? So I thought that was
designed to be manipulative.
And that is absolutely true. That is what marketing is, right?
And propaganda.
Which you could argue is maybe a malicious form of marketing.
For sure. Or not. I mean, there's good propaganda too, right? There's good and bad propaganda. So, its fact remains, it still is propaganda.
But it's interesting because from my perspective as a physician, so when you're, seeing patients, it's not uncommon for a pharmaceutical rep. So let's say I, work with, let's say I, as a neurologist, I don't want to name drop any meds or any pharma companies, but, I use a certain medication a lot. So the rep, I have their attention and I prescribe it a lot because my patient population is specialized and they need that medicine, right? That's the clinical reason I'm making that scientific decision and offering it to my patients, letting them make the final decision, because we don't practice paternal medicine anymore, right? We are partners with our patients and they decide what happens in their life. Even if I think something's the best choice, it's up to them. So now I've got the pharmaceutical company's attention and they're going to come in and bring lunches and things. You as a physician, you have to report if you get gifts from pharmaceutical companies. And it's something like $5. Like literally, if you have a gift worth more than a few dollars, you have to report it. And that will be watched to make sure you're not doing any funny business with your prescribing, that you're not being incentivized to prescribe a medicine. Now, there are some bad actors that have had relationships with pharma companies in the past, and you can Google them and find them. It's not that they don't exist. But I can assure you the vast majority of physicians, 99.9% of them, are just prescribing the right medicine for their patient, or the medicine that when they discuss it with their patient chooses. Or another big issue, the medicine that their insurance will cover, so they therefore can afford that medicine. But 99.9, probably 999% of doctors are not sitting there thinking, oh, who's going to bring me lunch next week? That's how I'm going to prescribe. But I do think, there is an issue where that's how doctors are treated, and they're watched very closely to make sure their prescribing is ethical, which, generally speaking, is very ethical and very mindful. And yet behind the scenes, when you look at how a lot of these studies are funded and how, these companies are built, and one's owned by this, but it's in a trust, so you don't really know. I think when you look at the standard to which a physician is held, but then you look at the standard to which a publicly traded corporation is held, there's some disparity there that is disconcerting, right?
Well,
So I think
you've heard about the stuff going on with Kellogg's and
Mm.
the dyes, and how they feed our kids these orange and blue and yellow sugar balls full of all these cancerous red dyes, and that you cannot go across the border to Windsor, Ontario, and buy that same
right,
cereal. It has,
right.
instead
Or in
of
Europe, much
red dye,
stricter
right, much stricter.
regulations on food. Yeah.
Yet you guys, they can poison our kids, but doctors are held to a much higher standard. Obviously, that's good, but I see where you're going with that. That even, but wouldn't be taking gifts or even reported? Isn't there some kind of, and I don't know how doctors work, but what is there a watchdog agency over physicians for that stuff, or is it like a national? Is it state regulated ethics boards, or a national
exactly.
type
There are
deal,
ethics boards, and there's your your licensure on the state level, and your board, which is on a national level. But again, there's a lot of regulation, a lot of money and time and effort goes into regulating people that are pretty big rule followers, which is fine that the regulations are there. But it's really interesting because sometimes when a lot of attention is being paid to a group of people, that you don't really have to regulate them quite as firmly as you are. And you're being really, loud and persistent about it. We got to make sure we keep these doctors in check. They're such bad actors. But then it's like no one's paying attention to the people who have a lot more power over what drugs are actually available to people, and what's in them, and how they're marketed, and how they're distributed, and does insurance cover them? Does insurance not cover them? So it's really interesting kind of how it plays out in real time, and what the conversations become. And I do think taking a step back and kind of peeking behind the curtain can be really interesting. And something else you said was really interesting when you were talking about facts, and like facts are facts. A lot of it is also perspective taking. So something we see as a fact in another culture could be not a fact. And even something as simple as the colors we as humans, we see different colors than dogs see. And so we could be like, this color is this color. And a dog,
even people see different colors.
But
people see different colors too. Yeah. And it's like,
there's a physical reason for that, whether it's your rods and cones inside your retinas or whatever it is inside your eyeballs, there's a scientific reason why if I'm seeing blue, Jim's seeing green, because his DNA for some reason caused those things to go on in his eyeball, right? So you can always take those steps back to their basic foundations and why those facts change.
But I think it's an interesting example, again, when we're kind of stuck in these heated discussions, to kind of take a step back and be like, gosh, would I be, my husband is colorblind. I'm not mad at him because he's colorblind. I'm just like, no, I just asked him, like, what do you see? And again, it's leaning into those curious questions instead of being like, why can't you see the color the way it's supposed to be? Instead, I'm like, he'll tell me something and I'm thinking, oh, that's interesting. I'll say, what do you see? Like, what does it look like to you?
I have that happen all the time. Hey, hand me that green bowl. No, the blue one? You mean this blue bowl? Is that what you want? No, the green.
Yeah.
Green.
So we can get curious, not furious. And I think that will take us closer to understanding. And that will just make life more harmonious, which at the end of the day, to get through this day and tomorrow, seeking that harmony and connection will get us closer to the future that we all want, as you said at the top of the discussion, and rather getting kind of stuck in despair.
and not have those knee-jerk reactions, which I learned all about on your little YouTube short video today, which I really did find enlightening. So thanks for putting that out. And
Thank you.
You got really a bunch of cool short stuff that you can really get a lot of in 45 seconds or a minute and a half. And they're just quick hits, and you're like, whoa, stuff you can think about on your drive to work, or just give some thought to.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am very intentional about going everywhere from long form to very short form. And then in between, my short talks are usually between 7 to 10 minutes, depending upon the topic. And then there's, the TV spots. Those are usually 2 to 4 minutes long. So really trying to make sure through that. And I have a newsletter too that I highly recommend. I don't have a big newsletter following yet, but I would highly recommend people sign up for that. You can go to my website, drschaferstedronova.com, and sign up for the newsletter, because the cool thing about the newsletter that I'm really enjoying about writing it is it's very cohesive, and it explains, why we aired this guest this week, why we delved into this short talk, maybe what's going on in the country, what's going on in the world, how are we navigating it, what did we do on media, things my daughter's doing, also to kind of bring that levity and that joy, even if life isn't feeling very light. So yeah, I would love for more people to sign up for that, because it's a great way to see everything that's out there and decide what you want to enjoy.
And say that again. Where do they find it?
Oh, drschaferstedronova.com.
Okay, great.
And you'll put that on our thingy, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Our show notes, is that what they're called? I think we're on episode, we're coming up on 40 now.
Yeah.
That's
like
awesome.
37.
It is.
And evolving. That's the best thing, is the evolution that comes with podcasting and doing something you love.
Well, for sure. It's been a big evolution.
But 95% of it's this guy's dedication to this stuff. He just works so hard at it. I'm just impressed every time he tells, I did this today, I did that today. I'm like,
well, thanks.
wow.
That's awesome.
Well, I yell at you, and you and I get in fights all the time, but I still love you.
We do?
Well, not really. Just little spats like this. I go home and, man, I can't believe what Jim said today.
That's funny.
But you seek to understand one another, and you repair, and you sit right back next to each other, and you do another episode.
Yeah, I come back to win.
It's not going well for him.
Yeah. No, well, it is going. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. He is a better pickleball player than me, I will admit.
And you're a better golfer, so there you go.
Thank you.
I love it.
Well, Dr. Schafer, again, great to have you on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Great words of wisdom today. I hope those of you listening appreciate what she had to say. And check out not only her website, but her podcast and other information.
And the newsletter.
Comments. And the newsletter.
I'm clicking on the news. As soon as I get home, I'll be newslettering you, or you'll be newslettering me.
Oh, please do. Yeah, sign up. And you can send me back notes if you disagree with me, and we can have our discussions too. It'll be fun.
Let's do it.
And anybody else, comment on the post, tell me what you love, tell me what is going on in your life, what you want to delve into, because it's very much interactive. And that's what I love about the agility of podcasting. It's not the media where you have to do it 6 months, a year in advance. You can respond to people, and you can really make it a group discussion. So I'd love it if people would comment and tell me what's on their minds that they want to cover, and I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome.
Excellent. Well, thanks again.
Thanks, Doc. Stay warm up there.
Yeah.
We'll try. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Have a great night.
All right,
take care.
Bye.
So if you just listen to this podcast and you appreciate the content and the work that we're doing, we would love your support. Look in the comment section of this episode. Subscribe, rate us, comment. This gets our podcast in front of other listeners. And if you noticed, we don't have advertisers. For the cost of a cup of coffee, you can help keep it this way. Become a supporter right now. We'd appreciate it. I'm Jim the Yogi.
I'm Rick the Beach Man. Peace.